Pericles and Athens by A.R. Byrne, The Golden Age of Greece, is seen through the life of a leading statesman. And let's see if we can finish this book here. Pericles seemed unconscious, and they talked of his greatness and magnanimity, and achievements including no less than 9 trophies set up for victories won under his command. But the brain that had been for so long the brain of Athens had not yet ceased working, and a whisper from the bed interrupted them. Pericles said that he was surprised that they talked of victories, things that depend largely on fortune, and had happened to many generals. But you have not spoken, he said, of the best thing, that is, that no Athenian ever were mourning because of me. So died the great builder and idealist, leaving his city beset by war and the plague, with no one fit to succeed him as advisor to the democracy. He could withstand the people to their face, so that Thucydides says it was democracy in theory, but the rule of the chief citizen in practice. But his successors, more on the level with each other, and rivals for power, tried to please the people by giving way to them, and from that arose many mistakes. Even apart from that, Pericles' peculiar blend of military and political strategy made him a dangerous model to imitate. The political general is traditionally a bad general. That Pericles himself met with no disasters was due to the fact that he always aimed, during his period of supremacy, at strictly limited objectives, as well as to his combining, like Marlborough, political and military power. Nicias, a hard-working, methodical brigadier who feared only the people, imitated Pericles' caution and attention to details, with an infinite capacity for taking pains, but without genius, and avoiding disaster for as long as Demos allowed him. By avoiding major actions altogether, Alcibiades, who became a general at 30, was far more dangerous. He was continually trying to achieve by diplomacy conquests that could only be won by hard fighting, if at all. Misunderstanding Pericles, whose strategy in the years when Alcibiades remembered him had served a policy not of extending Athens' power, but of conserving it. The war dragged on, growing unceasingly bitter, as the latent class war in the Greek states burst into flame in city after city, the Democrats everywhere inclining to Athens and the oligarchs to Sparta. Thucydides' analysis, with merciless lucidity, the neurosis of war and revolution, and the increasing success of the cruder types of intelligence in these conditions, Athens was still strong enough to suppress revolts in the empire, and did so with increasing brutality. But her counterblows at the main enemy lacked weight, since the plague and were mostly failures. A gallant and attractive Spartan, Brasidas, with very small forces, made his way overland to Thrace, where he captured Amphipolis, and spread rebellion in Chalcidica. And even so, Athens weathered the storm. After 10 years of desultory war, the peace of Nicias, was concluded, leaving both sides to hold what they had at the time. It would have been well if that were the end of the story, but now comes forward the brilliant, unstable, ambitious Alcibiades, a heaven-sent leader for the war party, for the trading classes, for whom war had become a profession. Led by Alcibiades, Athens plunged into a policy of adventures, took a nasty knock in an attempt to back Argos, and a land war with Sparta, slaughtered the whole male population of Melos Island, which refused to join her empire, and then embarked on the widest aggression of all against Saracussa. Syracuse is how people. Nicias opposed this project as unsound, but he was not strong enough to resist the people at the end, and ultimately found himself in charge of it. Alcibiades was in joint command, and then his enemies felled him, with the prosecution for sacrilege, for courting the anger of heaven against Athens, by a wild parody of the holy mysteries of Eleusis, in which he and some friends had indulged at a drunken party. Alcibiades fled to Sparta, and gave advice that was ruinous to his own country. Nicias's army in Sicily was baffled, defeated, cut off, and at last utterly destroyed. It was the decisive blow. Though she struggled on grimly for another 10 long years against renewed Peloponnesian attacks, Athens fell at last, her fleet destroyed, her empire in revolt, her city besieged and starving. Even her democracy was overthrown, though for a few months only. With Alcibiades, indeed, the curse of the Alcmeonidae came home, where Pericles, bred in an older world, had devoted every natural gift to the service of Athens, and had desired to rule her. So at least he would have rationalized, only that he might serve. Alcibiades, growing up in Pericles' strange house, and in an age of intellectual disintegration, quite consciously sought to enjoy himself, even in politics. He, above all, though among many others, was the fated instrument by which Athens came to disaster. And yet, after all, Pericles' objects were only those of every other Athenian imperialist. Though his methods showed greater prudence, he had labored often for peace, always to conserve Athens' strength. But he recoiled, it seems, only pour mieux sauter. Is that how you say that? No doubt, if he had died young, someone else would have led Athens on the path of empire, and probably done it worse. But as things were, it is he above all others who is identified with the growth of the Athenian empire, leading Athens ever farther into the impasse, even higher up of her subject allies, to an even more dangerous and lonely eminence. This brings us back to his last recorded words: "No Athenian ever wore black because of me." He was thinking, no doubt, of his carefulness, of his men's lives in the field, and of his magnanimity and liberalism at home. But can he really have believed that no wives and mothers of the men who fell in war, which he, against opposition, had precipitated, had worn black because of him? Or had the dying Pericles an uneasy conscience? And did the idealist within him know that in his work for the supremacy of Athens and for his own supremacy in Athens, he had been, even as all the older Alcmeonidae? For indeed, that great house was truly under a curse, if we may accept what the wise man of Ephesus said: a man's daemon, his guardian spirit, and so his fate, is his character, said Heraclitus, and the leading trait in his character of all the great Alcmeonids, whether they conspired with the tyrant or against him, whether they found a democracy or described it like Alcibiades as a patient lunacy, was the craving to be first. It was rare as a result for an Alcmeonid to end his life without disaster. And if we say with Heraclitus that a man's character is his fate, we may well add that to the unquiet mind of the dying Pericles, the noblest of their line was the avenging fury of the house of Alcmeon. And so, to show you there, the aristocracy. And let's remember that the people certainly help produce greatness in a leader. It takes a greatness of enough people to accept the best of leaders. So, for there to be a philosopher king, as Plato would later speak of, we need to have a certain potential starting to be realized among people. And let's not rely just on having, such a great leader. Whether it is that we let things drop off when that leader goes, or whether we just don't develop as a society because we're like, such and such leaders are, over speaking about themselves. But let's live out for ourselves certain moral, physical, and mental achievements, and let's expect these qualifications of our leaders.